Have you ever noticed yourself apologizing to someone even after they have insulted you? Have you ever noticed yourself defending someone's behavior even though they never took responsibility or apologized? Many people learn early in life that forgiving others is a virtue and is often treated as a key sign of being a morally good person. In psychological research, grace can also be examined for its less visible and more troubling aspects. Forgiveness can support healing when it follows accountability and change. When it is offered repeatedly in the absence of those conditions, it can function less as repair and more as permission for continued mistreatment. This suggests that forgiveness has limits and should be weighed alongside personal safety, boundaries, and the offender's actions over time. This refers to excessive forgiveness, which may reflect unresolved psychological harm and learned strategies for self-protection. To make sense of someone who forgives too quickly, it helps to start by stating what forgiveness looks like when it is healthy and well-judged. From a psychological view, forgiveness often takes time. It means clearly recognizing the harm and then choosing, step by step, to let go of resentment. For someone who forgives too quickly, this is less a deliberate process and more an automatic reflex. This can be understood as a preemptive strike intended to prevent conflict before it starts. What can seem like spiritual maturity or emotional strength may instead be a careful form of self-protection, shaped to reduce perceived risk and to avoid the anxiety that can come with direct confrontation. In an academic framing, excessive forgiveness is often tied to three main psychological factors: a tendency to avoid conflict, low self-esteem, and unusually high empathy. Conflict avoidance can be partly explained as a bodily stress response. For some people, the tension that comes with disagreement is felt in the body and can be experienced as pain. To reduce that distress, some people choose to forgive right away. Low self-worth can influence behavior when someone believes their boundaries are not important enough to justify a conflict. They may see their anger as something that troubles other people, so they hold it back rather than express it. Another case to consider is hyperempathy. It describes seeing the reasons behind someone's harmful behavior, such as childhood trauma, stress at work, or insecurity, so clearly that the person who was harmed stops focusing on what actually happened. In some cases, people focus so much on making sense of the perpetrator's motives and behavior that they lose sight of the harm they have experienced. Such patterns in adulthood usually develop over time rather than appearing suddenly. They are often shaped by the basic plans set early in development. A common explanation is the fawn response. Many people know the fight-or-flight response. Fawning is another trauma response in which someone tries to please, agree with, or soothe a person who seems threatening, with the aim of lowering the risk of harm. In families where a parent's moods were unpredictable or volatile, many children learn early that quick forgiveness and keeping the peace can feel like the safest option. Over time, this pattern can become less about genuine repair and more about reducing the risk of conflict or punishment. Your actions should not be read as moral virtue. They are better understood as a strategic choice. Over time, this coping strategy can become part of a person's personality, and it may develop into a persistent fear of being abandoned. A person who forgives too often may think, if I set limits or ask for accountability, they will leave. From that view, staying in a harmful relationship can feel safer than being alone. Some researchers refer to this pattern as moral grandiosity, where a person presents their moral views in an inflated way to appear more virtuous than others. Some people forgive quickly because their sense of self is tied to being the bigger person. This statement reflects spiritual bypassing, where spiritual language is used to avoid dealing with distress, conflict, or unresolved emotional issues. In academic terms, it points to a coping pattern that shifts attention away from the underlying problem rather than engaging with it directly. When they forgive right away, they may be avoiding the messy and painful, but understandable, anger that the situation warrants. They are not truly at peace. Instead, they adopt a posture of holiness as a way to avoid facing the discomfort tied to their unresolved wounds. Yet this so-called easy grace comes at a very high cost. Forgiving quickly does not always remove the original hurt. In many cases, it simply leaves the hurt unaddressed and pushes it into the background, where it can remain as unresolved emotional stress. When you keep saying that everything is fine even though it is not, you reinforce an internal belief that your own feelings do not matter. Over time, this can weaken a person's sense of self. Over time, the person may no longer be able to identify their own personal boundaries. People often treat us in line with the expectations and boundaries we set through what we accept and reinforce. When boundaries are not backed by any clear outcomes, others have little reason to respect them and are likely to overstep again. If you forgive someone while their behavior stays the same, that act is less about mercy and more about allowing the behavior to continue without consequences. When pain is held in over time, it can turn into anger that gets directed inward. This often shows up as depression, ongoing fatigue, or sudden bursts of anger over minor, unrelated events, because the person has reached a limit and cannot hold any more. To address this pattern, it is important to distinguish clearly between forgiveness and reconciliation. Forgiveness is a private process. It means letting go of resentment so you are not stuck carrying the emotional burden of what someone did to you. In contrast, reconciliation is an outward process that requires both parties. This process depends on both parties. One offers a sincere apology, and the other sees clear, sustained changes in behavior over time. People who forgive too quickly often mix up forgiveness with restoring trust. In practice, forgiving someone does not mean you have to place them back in the same role or level of trust they had before, especially if the reasons for the breach have not been addressed. Reasserting personal boundaries does not mean becoming bitter or hostile. Boundary setting can be firm and still remain respectful. It calls for developing careful judgment. A practical approach for this situation is the 24-hour rule. Do not say it is okay until at least 24 hours have passed. This gives the nervous system time to calm down and helps you assess whether you are genuinely feeling fine or simply responding out of fear of conflict. One more step is to focus on impact rather than intent. Even when no harm was intended, the impact on the person affected is still real. Paying attention to the impact can help you check your experience against what actually happened and how it affected you. Anger can provide useful information, since it often points to a perceived harm, an unmet need, or a boundary that feels violated. This refers to the aspect of the mind that supports self-care and aims to keep you safe. Rather than trying to silence it, we should pay attention to what it is telling us. Channel that resolve into a clear statement. I forgive you for what happened, and I will not let it happen again. Kindness is not only about agreeing or giving. It also takes self-control to set limits and say no when needed. Forgiveness can be valuable, but it matters how it is offered. It should be a deliberate choice made with a sense of agency and self-respect, not something given under pressure or out of fear. A basic form of strength is choosing to protect yourself, especially when you have spent a long time waiting for that care from others.